Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we contemplate one of the most profound works of literature and spirituality that I have ever personally read, The Secret of the Golden Flower. I'm very excited today to be able to present my reflections on The Secret of the Golden Flower, not only because it has had such a profound impact and influence on my life as a book that I have held precious for many, many years, which I've read dozens of times, but also because it speaks directly to the central problem of our time. And that is the challenge of understanding why it is that after all these centuries and millennia of civilization, that our species in our generation has brought the entire life process to the brink of extinction. Not only through thermonuclear war, which is more imminent today than it has ever been, but also through climate change, runaway artificial intelligence, and a range of other global challenges that are being left unsolved. The great question is why? Today, I want to ponder this from the vantage point of an obscure book that originated in ancient China, that was essentially unknown in the West until it was published in 1929, with translation of Richard Wilhelm, a German linguist and philosopher who had traveled and spent many, many years in China, wrote a beautiful book called The Soul of China. And then he translated the I Ching, the Book of Changes. And then just months before he passed, his translation of The Secret of the Golden Flower, which had a commentary by him and also by Carl Jung, who was a good friend of his. And I came across it by complete serendipity when I was doing my doctoral dissertation at Cambridge back in the late 1970s. And I can still remember when I picked it up, I felt a tremor, and I knew that I was being encountered by an intelligence not my own. And I can remember just sitting down in this little meditation center where I was the caretaker. As I was doing my doctoral studies, I was a starving student. I had no money. I found through miraculous pathways an opportunity to be a caretaker at a little meditation center operated by a group of Cambridge and Oxford dons called the Epiphany Philosophers. And I had to pay $5 a week. And at that time, I could afford it. I worked during the summers, and then I would be in Cambridge for the next 9 months. So I had to make my pennies last. I used to go into the university, and they used to have lunches. These different clubs would have lunches. And so I would sidle in and enjoy the granary loaf and Edam cheese and pickle that they would have. And those were my lunches for many years as I was this classic, starving student struggling to write my PhD. And in the course of this, I was gifted by the universe, The Secret of the Golden Flower, and it has had probably more impact on me, maybe than any other single book of spirituality, because it taught me how to meditate. And that's where I'm going to end up today. But I want to start with Jung's commentary, which, when I read it at that time, I realized that I was understanding a deeper layer of reality that I had never even thought about before, but which explained metaphysically why our world teeters on the brink of self-destruction. He made the simplest point imaginable. It reminds me of Einstein's quip that genius is that capacity to see simplicity. You think of everything we encounter, it's full of complexity. Nobody understands except the experts. But occasionally a genius comes along and just realizes, hey, it's just E equals mc squared. Energy is proportional to matter. And if you understand that, you get the speed of light and off we go. Carl Jung, as he was contemplating things around that time, having just emerged from the carnage of the First World War, which left tens of millions of people dead and wounded, an event that shocked the conscience of Europe and undermined the moral certitudes with which the Europeans had built Western civilization and conquered essentially the rest of the world through superior technology. And when Jung and Richard Wilhelm interacted around The Secret of the Golden Flower, Jung himself says that the secret of the golden flower for him, as it was for me, was a portal through which he understood the psyche more fundamentally than he'd understood it before. And his great realization, which I want to start my little homily on The Secret of the Golden Flower, is that the basic distinction between Eastern civilization and Western civilization is that Eastern civilization epitomized so exquisitely in the symbol of the Tao, with the yin and the yang. And the inside of the yin is the yang, and the inside of the yang is the yin. And they're in a perpetual dance, but they're contained within the Tao, within wholeness. And West, Judeo-Christianity, the civilization that has emerged in Europe and North America, which has great power, but it has no Tao. It has the polarities, but it has no container within which to hold the polarities. So while Eastern civilizations, China, India, the indigenous peoples, all have had a notion of a fundamental unity, a fundamental oneness within which all the diversity of life is contained and interacts in a sacred circle. of living intelligence. The West has never had a container and has never had a way to unite the polarities. And you can see this in the basic theological structure and metaphysics of Judaism, of Christianity, of Islam. There's God and there's creation. God is holy, God is sacred, God is transcendent, and God, in his, note the gender, infinite wisdom, creates creation as separate from himself. And while he is sacred, creation is not. And therefore, in creation, there are inequalities. And the Jews first, and then the Christians, and then the Muslims, in this metaphysic of dualism, said, we're chosen, and the rest of you are not. And if you think through the implications of that basic metaphysic of dualism, you have everything you need to know about why we've ended up on the abyss of self-destruction. Because if you impute the holy, the numinous, the sacred outside of your reality, you desacralize everything that you are and everything that the world is. And if it's desacralized, you can do anything to it. If you're the chosen people and the Canaanites are not chosen, you can do anything you want to them. That's the basis of the doctrine of discovery, articulated in 1492 and 1493 by the popes to give sanction, divine providential permission for the Spanish and the Portuguese, but Europeans generally, to go to the rest of the world and do whatever they wanted to the non-Christians, because they were going to go to hell anyway. So this basic point that Jung is making is fundamental to understanding the current Western inability to stop savaging the planet and engaging in perpetual war. I said yesterday, the United States alone, since the end of the Second World War, according to Jeffrey Sachs and a variety of commentators, has overthrown, destabilized, manipulated coercively over 100 countries around the world. The latest example being Ukraine. But if you look back over the last 75 years, starting actually in 1953 with the coup organized by the CIA in Iran, that overthrew a constitutionally, democratically elected government and brought in a dictator, the Shah, who was overthrown by the Ayatollah. And look at Iran today, a totalitarian, vicious state that would have never arisen had not the CIA and British intelligence overthrown Mossadegh in 1953. And that tale of tears is replicated 100 times around the world. Why? Because we have no sense that the other is who we are. That I am you and you are me and we are all together as one. That mentality does not exist in Western civilization, except rarely among a few mystics, most of whom have been burned at the stake. So when we seek to understand what's going on, it's really important to go back to these basic categories of existence and cognition, to understand the implications of our philosophical and religious traditions. The Abrahamic religions, based on dualism, have brought more violence and pain and suffering to the world than the rest of the world over recorded history combined. More violence has been engendered by Western civilization than the rest of the world in recorded history combined. And Jung understood why. Now, let me explain the psychological processes that Jung says in his beautiful commentary takes place. If you split yourself off from the opposites, if you don't have a container, if you don't have a moral framework to hold the opposites together, they split. And then your ego clings to one as opposed to the other. I'm a Jew. I'm chosen. You're a Gentile. You're not holding them together. You're a Christian. I'm the elect. I believe in Jesus. You don't. I'm going to heaven. You're going to hell. Where's the container? There's no container. This is fundamental, folks. That when you don't have this container psychologically, when what Jung calls the archetype of the self, the archetype that holds it all together, if that's not operating, then all the polarities, all the contradictions in life get split off. You cling to one over the other, and that is the process of dissociation. And this is fundamental. The process of dissociation is the process where will supplants instinct. And this is worth pausing around. When you're in nature, you operate by instinct. You see it with the animals. Instinct isn't the lack of will. Instinct is the alignment with the natural processes, with the Tao. If you're in alignment with Tao, if you're in alignment with the whole, you naturally know where to go because your will is subordinate to life. If you split off the opposites from each other and cling to one rather than the other, you get dissociated. And then your only thing you have is your will. But because you've been cut off from your instincts, because there's no wholeness that you're relating to, you act with violence because you become obsessed with power. If you're holding the whole, what emerges is wisdom. What emerges is instinct. What emerges is a subordination of the ego to the larger relational ecosystem. But when you break away, will, power, domination rules supreme. because you've got to subordinate the other. You've established full spectrum dominance over the whole planet, suppress everybody else, clean out Canaan of the Palestinians, destroy whoever it is that is not you. Now, Jung makes a really important point about this, and that is that once the process of dissociation takes place, the unconscious processes that are being repressed by conscious will, as you cling to one polarity as opposed to the other, the unconscious processes support the dissociative process. And the reason why this is important for all of us to understand is because we think that if you don't really agree with me, if you have a different point of view, you really don't understand. How could Trump be doing this to the U.S. government? Well, he must be ignorant or he must be evil. The seduction of dissociation is the seduction of the intellect rationalizing what the will needs to do to suppress that which it is saying is not of itself. And that's why with dissociation, you get inflation, as Jung called it, ego inflation. You get arrogance, which is classically called hubris, which in the Jewish account of things, in the book of Genesis, that original sin was not a sin of ignorance, but a sin of arrogance, a sin of overweening pride and hubris. Very, very powerful insight into the fundamental nature of reality. It's not that we don't know. It's that we're inflated because we've lost our capacity to hold the contradictions together. Because it's only when you hold the contradictions together, says Jung, that you experience what he called the crucifixion of the ego. And when the ego becomes crucified at the hands of the self, humility, compassion, tolerance, acceptance, wisdom is what ensues. But the seduction of dissociation, particularly when the unconscious processes are supporting the dissociative process, is you think you're right. Netanyahu and his cohort running Israel really believe that genocide is the answer. They state it publicly. They're working for it day by day. They apparently have convinced Trump just to get rid of 2 million Palestinians. We want to think that they really know that's wrong. Possibly at some level they do. But according to Jung, the inflation of the ego in a dissociative psyche actually believes that power and subordination is morally and strategically correct. And where it all ends up, as we saw with Adolf Hitler, and we're probably going to see at some point with Israel, if they don't stop, is it brings down the fires of self-destruction. And that's what we're seeing on planet Earth today at the hands of the United States and Western civilization, which over the last 500 years has conquered the planet. in a metaphysic of dualism that other people don't matter. That's the doctrine of discovery. They debated for 100 years whether the savages in the Western Hemisphere had souls or not. And also the desacralization of nature, because there's nothing sacred in nature. You can exploit it however, whenever you would like, as long as you're extracting profits. And we're about ready to endure self-destruction. Jung says that's always where dissociation and the hubris of the ego ends up. And then he makes a final point that is important for us Westerners to take in. He says that this dissociative process is made even worse by the scientific enlightenment. We went way off because of the Abrahamic religions. And then we came up with the scientific enlightenment, which exacerbated and deepened our dissociative process. The Enlightenment, in saying we're going to get rid of religion and we're just going to have the supremacy of the intellect and reason, created, according to Jung, what he calls the monotheism of consciousness. That if it isn't rational, if it isn't intellectually explicable, if it isn't understandable in terms of the time, space, and causality that my ego needs to understand things, it's not real. It's not true. You see it all over mass media. If it's not scientific, ladies and gentlemen, it's not true. And those people in the East, they're not really scientific. Just check your own psyche for a moment. How many of all of us raised in this mentality that if it's not scientifically, empirically provable, it's not real? And we in the West are basically, we're superior because we have superior technology, superior scientific rationality, and we can control nature because nature is a mechanism of resources that we need, no more. So when Elon Musk goes around in his hubris wearing this t-shirt, Occupy Mars, you know perfectly well what he means. He has no sense of the sacred. He has no notion that Mars might be a living intelligence inhabited by extraterrestrial beings since deep primordial antiquity. He just wants to occupy Mars so he can begin to extract those rare minerals from Mars to build his spaceships. The same mentality with which the Europeans, with the doctrine of discovery at their back, went out and colonized and raped and pillaged the rest of the world, is what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates and all those other billionaires. That's the mentality that they're now beginning to look in terms of going into outer space. There's no sense of wholeness. There's only the split of the opposites and the overweening pride that comes out of a dissociative process when you've gotten enough power, gotten enough money to vanquish everybody in your small little world of time, space, and causality. Because as Jung says, ultimately, you cut yourself off from nature. you've cut yourself off from where you came. When I read that commentary, I was speechless for days because I just realized that everything that I thought had been true was wrong. And that I needed to learn afresh by drinking deeply of the well of Eastern mysticism to begin my pathway to wholeness. And this is why I'm delighted, my friends, to talk about the secret of the golden flower. The legend is that when Lao Tsu, the great Chinese sage of the 6th century BC, during China's warring states period, he was a contemporary of Confucius. There's speculation as to whether they ever met. They were the two intellectual and moral giants of their age. When Lao Tzu, who all his life remained poor, he chopped wood, he carried water, he had few friends, but as he grew into maturity, people started to come to him, to sit with him by the well and contemplate the true nature of reality. And then one day, he realized it was time for him to die. It was time to him to pass. And so he decided he was going to leave his home and just go up into the mountains alone and contemplate ultimate reality as he transitioned. He had to go along various roads and passes, and when he got to the highest pass, there was a gatekeeper that guarded the pass. The gatekeeper, as Lao Tzu approached, greeted him, said, "I know who you are. You're Lao Tzu. And I'm not going to let you pass until you write down your wisdom." So for 3 days and 3 nights, Lao Tzu sat in the gatekeeper's hut and wrote out what became known to history as the Tao de Ching, Book of Virtue. The way that can be spoken is not the true way, are those immortal words that were the first words that Lao Tzu wrote, as he wrote 64 little chapters, hexagrams, mirroring 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Can you imagine? And the gatekeeper accepted the book. And Lao Tzu went up to become who he needed to be to join the immortals. The gatekeeper was the author of The Secret of the Golden Flower. Isn't that a brilliant story? Just imagine ascending to your death, coming to the last gate post, being recognized for who you are, being asked to distill everything that you have learned about ultimate reality before you pass to your ultimate transition, and you write it down. 3 days and 3 nights. and give it to the gatekeeper. The secret of the golden flower carries the essence of the Chinese understanding of the Tao, that which holds all things. And the etymology of the Tao, the yin and the yang, the container of all, the Chinese character for the Tao, is a head, character for head, and the character for going, traversing. And the connotation of these characters is the connotation of that which does not move, gives impetus and direction to that which does move, to ensure that it gets to its goal. Just pause for a moment and take that in. That which does not move is that out of which all that does move emerges. And that which does not move is what ensures that which moves reaches its goal. The way. The conscious action of the moving, staying in alignment with that which does not move. Because that which does not move is the circle, is the Tao within which every polarity, every yin and yang that does move is contained. And the tragedy of the West, the tragedy of the Abrahamic religions is they have no sense of wholeness. And the brilliance of the East is that it does. And that's why one talks about the wisdom of the East and the power of the West. And this is personified in the story that we all know about dynamite. The Chinese were the first ones to invent dynamite, firecrackers, gunpowder. They knew you could create weapons out of it, but they chose not to. They used it for fireworks. They used it for all entertainment. Soon as the Europeans found out about it, the first thing they did, and the only thing they did, was build weapons and then go conquer those people that were still looking at the fireworks, looking down on them as inferior colored people because they didn't have enough sense to build weapons. This is what astonished the Native Americans in North America when the Europeans came over. They were incredulous. They said these people are crazy. They have no sense of reverence for anything. And because if you have a sense of reverence and the guy that is dealing with you has no sense of reverence, almost every time he's going to win because he knows no boundaries. This is the essence of Donald Trump. He has no sense of the sacred. He's unstoppable. because he's not bound by any of the conventional norms of morality or politics. He's a classic example of dissociation and the hubris and the power drive of a dissociated personality. It's extraordinary. We're watching it live on TV. So what the ancient masters in China articulated was a practice along the following lines to cultivate the Tao by realizing that human nature is comprised of two spirits: the primal spirit, which is existence, and conscious spirit, which is what we breathe in with our first breath. As soon as we come out of the womb, we breathe. And that pneuma comes into us as conscious spirit and resides in the heart. The heart is the place in our body where our conscious spirit resides. Our primal spirit is the body and resides in the liver, according to the ancient Chinese way of understanding our physiology. Our conscious spirit is always in motion, seeking, experiencing, climbing trees, running around, falling down, eating, engaging in life. Our primal spirit is that which is life. And it's the distinction you might want to think about between our autonomic and conscious systems. Most of what happens in our bodies, I think 96% of everything that's going on in our bodies, we don't even know about. My stomach's doing its thing, and my heart is doing its thing, and my lungs are doing its thing, and we're not even aware of it. We have like 3 or 4% of what happens we're consciously aware of. Like I'm conscious that I'm talking with you, but I have no idea how I'm talking. That's the distinction between the primal spirit and the conscious spirit. I'm seeing this with my little grandson, Charlie. You know, I get sent videos every couple of days. Little Charlie, he's 1 year old, and boy, he is out there uh, uh, doing everything he can to explore the world, putting everything in his mouth and crawling around, trying to stand up and you know, tasting everything. And you can see that's his conscious spirit. The key, says the secret of the golden flower, is to engage in a practice that unites the moving, the conscious, that's what seeks to experience reality, with the substrate, the primal consciousness. Why? Because as soon as the conscious spirit uses up all its allotment of the primal spirit, you die. That's profound. That when we begin our life, there's an allotment, the primal spirit. Jim has an allotted energetic equation, and I can use it all up. And if you have flowers, you see that as soon as they're using all their energy and they're bursting into complete bloom, they die because they've used up all their conscious spirit, according to the Chinese. And then they're reabsorbed into the primal spirit. However, If you learn how to integrate your conscious spirit into your primal spirit, you can lengthen your time, because the blending of the conscious spirit and the primal spirit in the correct way creates more energy. And that's the secret of the golden flower. So I'm going to tell you that secret. It's precious. It has everything to do with what the secret of the golden flower calls the circulation of the light. Because the fundamental reality, says the secret of the golden flower, is that we are light. All matter is light. Light is everything. That's why you have light and shadow. Everything is some configuration and manifestation of light. So the key, says the golden flower, is the circulation of the light in your body through what it calls the downward flowing motion. In a process that seeks to harmonize your breathing with your heart. That if you organize your breathing with your heartbeat, with the downward flowing motion of the light, you create harmony between the heart and your breathing, which is the key mechanism for longevity temporally, and the key mechanism for serenity in the moment. So how is it done? The practice as it's taught is that as you breathe, you sit, you quiet yourself as you can. You can look down the side of your nose and just not focus on anything, or you can close your eyes, but keep your gaze downward. As you breathe in, you consciously breathe the oxygen in your up into your brain and then down your spine as you breathe in with your coccyx through your genitalia into your abdomen. So you're going, it's the downward flowing motion of the light. And then as you breathe out, you bring it back up from your perineum up into your brain and circulate the light as you exhale. So you inhale, bringing the circulation down your spine as light. You just feel light and massaging your abdomen, your lower chakras. And then as you exhale, you bring the light up, and you can do your whole body. You can just bring it into your brain and your abdomen. There's all kinds of ways you can extend it as you get, because the light's everywhere. And then if you engage in what we call coherent breathing, 5.5 breaths, 5.5 notes in, 5.5 notes out, for 5.5 breaths in a minute, for 5.5 liters of air, you have the perfect breathing. And if you learn over time to sit quietly enough to listen to your heartbeat, and you regulate, you synchronize the inflowing downward motion of the breath and the light with your heartbeat, and then up the back of your spine into your brain as your count of 5 is by the, not your count, but the 5 beatings of your heart, according to the secret of the golden flower. You will cultivate an elixir within your soul that will optimize the blending between your conscious spirit contained in the heart, that which always moves. That's why the heart's always pumping. It's that which always moves. And the primal spirit, that which does not move. And if you practice this consciously and intentionally, what is cultivated? And this is a beautiful, beautiful turn of phrase. They call it the washing of the heart. You know, when we think of heartache, like when I see the genocide in Gaza, as I've found Humanity Rising a dozen times, it hurts my heart. Hurts my heart. Then when I do my practice, I'm aware that I'm washing my heart in the light. And I don't despair. And they said, you can also think of it as the bath. The bath. You're giving yourself a bath. You're washing with the downward inhalation. You're washing with the upward exhalation. You're circulating the light. You're coordinating your breathing with your heartbeat. And your primal conscious spirits blend. And then you begin to manifest this spirit in the world, says the secret of the golden flower, through Wu Wei, action through non-action. And that is the Tao. That is that which does not move, giving rise to everything that does move, and ensuring that it reaches its goal, back into the stillness from which all movement arises and returns in the Tao. So thank you, everyone, for countenancing my reflections on a book that I hold precious in my life, that has taught me unfathomable truths about how far I have to go to get to where I want to go. And I've been impatient for most of my life, as those people who know me will testify. And I've done a lot of damage and violence because of that, the arrogance of the intellect of an overeducated North American white male. And what solace I've gained is that I know that no matter who you are or where you are or how long you've been on the path, all of us, without exception, have the same distance to go. So day by day, I practice the circulation of the light. I attune to my heartbeat, regulate my breathing, and I pray to that which holds the whole, that whatever I offer into the world is considered of use, to that which never moves. And that's my appreciation of elixir, of washing the heart, bathing ourselves in light. That is the Tao. Thank you, everyone. I'll join the after chat for further discussion for those who are interested. I love you all very dearly. The opportunity to share from time to time some of my own inner reflections as we have speaker after speaker on this journey called Humanity Rising is it's its own washing of the heart in our own way, because it's dedicated to the sacred feminine who holds us all. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you